Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all okay. Welcome to Friday's English lesson. Today, we're going to have a little bit of a reading lesson to read a little bit more of our text. So our Alice and Wonderland texts, which we will be continuing in school next week, which is very exciting. So our what is to use our comprehension skills to understand the text, how by reading and researching, and why so we can visually represent chapter 4. So we're going to get on to a little bit more what this is going to look like after we've read our chapter. So the way that I'm going to do this, first we're going to have a little bit of a recap of what's happened so far using our summarizer magnifier. Then we're going to read together. So I'm going to stop at a few points just to kind of talk about what has happened, because as we have already found out, Alice in Wonderland is a little bit mind-boggling sometimes in terms of what is actually happening in our text. Talk about some new vocabulary, stop to answer some questions, and then at the end, I'm going to give you a little bit of a task. So that's going to be our reading lesson for today. Before we start then with our chapter, I'd just like us to have a go, just like we did on Tuesday, at seeing if you can remember what has happened in our text so far using our pictures to guide you. Okay, so you've got the pictures here. Can you have a go at talking out loud at home or talking in your head? What has happened in our story so far? Let's have a bit of a recap, a little bit of a summary. Pause the video now for me. Have a look at our pictures and see if you can tell either somebody at home or just talk to yourself at home what has happened so far in our story. Okay, so let's have a look at this together then. So we've got some pictures to help remind us. So first we've got the rabbit, and we remember Alice saw the rabbit running across her garden and she thought it was quite peculiar because he was speaking, he was saying, oh dear, I'm going to be late. And he also had a waistcoat and a pocket watch. Alice followed the rabbit, and she ended up falling all the way down the rabbit hole, and she fell for what felt like miles and miles and miles, and she saw lots of strange things on the way down, which made us think she might be going into a bit of a strange world. For example, that empty jar of marmalade and the bookcase and the piano. She landed here in the hall of doors, where there were lots of doors, but they were all locked. There was a key on this table, but the key fitted this little tiny door here, so she was going to have to work out how to get out of this door. However, she then discovered a potion which made her shrink very small, and then a cake that made her grow very big, which we can see here, her getting bigger and smaller, and that allowed her to eventually get the key and open the door. Then, however, she discovered she had cried so much because she was so worried about getting out into the garden that she was in a pool of her own tears, where she met this guy, Mouse. He was a little bit feisty. Okay, had quite a lot of strong opinions. And after her and the mouse managed to get out of the pool of tears, they ended up being involved in this circus race, which was all of these strange kind of party of animals. And they decided to have a race to try and dry off. Now, it was a little bit of a strange race because nobody really knew when it started, when it ended, what the race involved, or who the winners were. Okay, so it was all a bit chaotic. Okay, so they did their race, and then suddenly at the end of chapter 3, all of the animals left, and Alice was left all alone again. So we are now then on chapter 4, and it is called The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. So if you can take your books at home, and you can turn to chapter 4, page 43. Page 43, chapter 4 for me, and we're going to read a little bit together. Okay, so hopefully we're ready then. I'm going to read along. I'm going to read, if you want to read along at home, that'd be fabulous. So you are following along the text as well. So chapter 4, the rabbit sends in a little bill. It was a white rabbit trotting slowly back again and looking anxiously about as it went, as if it had lost something, and she heard it muttering to itself. The Duchess! The Duchess! Oh, my dear paws! Oh, my fur and whiskers! You'll get me executed, as sure as ferrets are ferrets. Where can I have dropped them, I wonder? Okay, so here we can hear again the rabbit, and here we can see him, a little picture of him. He is talking to himself, and he is saying, oh, my dear paws, oh, my fur and whiskers. Okay, so this is kind of like saying, oh, my goodness. Okay, but he's obviously a rabbit, so he's talking about his fur and his whiskers. Okay, and he's saying, she'll get me executed as sure as ferrets are ferrets. Okay, because we know that a ferret, so like a rodent animal, is a ferret, and he's saying that he's pretty sure that someone is going to get him executed. Okay, now we don't know who at the minute. We don't know who this she is. Where can I have dropped them, I wonder? Alice guessed in a moment that it was looking for a fan and a pair of white kid gloves, and she very good-naturedly began hunting about for them, but they were nowhere to be seen. Everywhere seemed to have changed since her swim in the pool, and the great hall, with the glass table and the little door, had vanished completely. Very soon the rabbit noticed Alice as she went hunting about, and called out to her in an angry tone, "Why, Marianne, what are you doing here? Run home this moment and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan, quick, now!" And Alice was so much frightened that she ran off at once in the direction it pointed to, without trying to explain the mistake it had made. "He took me for his housemaid," she said to herself as she ran. "How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. But I'd better take him his fan and gloves, that is, if I can find them." As she said this, she came upon a neat little house, on the door of which was a bright brass plate with the name W. Rabbit engraved upon it. She went in without knocking, and hurried upstairs, in great fear lest she should meet the real Marianne, and be turned out of the house before she had found the fan and gloves. Now, this word "lest" is a very new word. I had to look at what we actually meant by "lest," because I've heard it used before, but I wasn't actually quite sure what we meant by it. Okay, so she said she went in without knocking and hurried upstairs in great fear lest she should meet the real Marianne. Okay, so lest kind of means, so it says here, because of the possibility of something undesirable happening. So it kind of means just in case that happens. So she went in without knocking and hurried upstairs in great hurry, just in case she should meet the real Marianne. Okay, so it's saying just in case something bad happens. Let's read on. "How queer it seems," Alice said to herself, "to be going messages for a rabbit. I suppose Dina will be sending me on messages next." And she began fancying the sort of thing that would happen. "Miss Alice, come here directly and get ready for our walk." "Coming in a minute, nurse, but I've got to watch this mouse hole till Dina comes back and see that the mouse doesn't get out." Only I don't think, Alice went on, that they'd let Dina stop in the house if it began ordering people about like that. Okay, so she's imagining now, if this rabbit is giving me orders, maybe my cat at home could give me orders too, and how strange would that be? By this time she had found her way into a tiny little room with a table in the window, and on it, as she had hoped, a fan and 2 or 3 pairs of tiny white kid gloves. She took up the fan and the pair of gloves, and was just going to leave the room when her eye fell upon a little bottle that stood near the looking-glass. There was no label this time with the words "Drink me," but nevertheless she uncorked it and put it to her lips. "I know something interesting is sure to happen," she said to herself, "whenever I eat or drink anything. So I'll just see what this bottle does." Predictions, what do we think then might happen if Alice drinks this potion? I wonder. I do hope it'll make me grow large again, for really I'm quite tired of being such a tiny little thing. It did so indeed, and much sooner than she expected. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressing against the ceiling, and had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. She hastily put down the bottle, saying to herself, "That's quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more. As it is, I can't get out the door. I do wish I hadn't drunk quite so much." Alas, it was too late to wish that. She went on growing and growing, and very soon had to kneel down on the floor. In another minute there was not even room for this, and she tried the effect of lying down, with one elbow against the door, and the other arm curled round her head. Still she went on growing, and as the last resource, she pulled one arm out of the window and one foot up the chimney. She said to herself, "Now I can do no more. Whatever happens, what will become of me?" What do we think then? We missed a bit. What do we think then has happened to Alice? So using your retrieval, what's happened to her now? See if you can tell me at home. Okay, so Alice has drunk the potion and she's got so big that now she is squashed into the house. Her head is pressing on the ceiling. She's all had to curl up. At this point, she's also had to put one of her hands out of the window so she can fit, and her foot has had to go up the chimney just so she can fit in the little house now because she's grown so big. Okay. Luckily for Alice, the little magic bottle had now had its full effect, and she grew no larger. Still, it was very uncomfortable, and as there seemed to be no sort of chance of her ever getting out of the room again, no wonder she felt unhappy. It was much pleasanter at home, thought poor Alice, when one wasn't always growing larger and larger and smaller, and being ordered about by mice and rabbits. I almost wish I hadn't gone down the rabbit hole. And yet, it's rather curious, this sort of life. I do wonder what could have happened to me. When I used to read fairy tales, I fancied that kind of thing never happened, and now here I am, in the middle of one. There ought to be a book written about me. That there ought. Isn't that funny? Alice is saying there ought to be a book written about me, which is funny because we are reading it right now. And when I grow up, I'll write one. But I'm grown up now, she added in a sorrowful tone. At least, there's no room to grow up any more here. But then, thought Alice, shall I never get any older than I am now? That'll be a comfort in one way. Never to be an old woman, but then always to have lessons to learn. Oh, I shouldn't like that. Oh, you foolish Alice, she answered herself. How can you learn lessons in here? Why, there's hardly any room for you, and no room at all for my lesson books. And so she went on, taking first one side and then the other, and making quite a conversation of it altogether. But after a few minutes she heard a voice outside, and stopped to listen. Marianne, Marianne, said the voice, fetch me my gloves this moment. Then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. Who do we think it is? Then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her, and she trembled till she shook the house, quite forgetting that she was now about 1,000 times as large as the rabbit, and had no reason to be afraid of it. Presently the rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it, but as the door opened inwards, and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved a failure. Alice heard it say to itself, then I'll go around and get in the window. That you won't, thought Alice, and after waiting till she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get hold of anything, and she heard a little shriek and a fall, and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible it had fallen into a cucumber frame or something of the sort. And we can see here we've got the white rabbit, and he's fallen into the cucumber frame, which is kind of like a bit of a a plant patch type thing where you kind of grow your vegetables in. So they had these in Alice in Wonderland, and this one had glass in it. Next came an angry voice, the rabbit's. Pat, Pat, where are you? And then a voice she'd never heard before. Sure then I'm here, digging for apples, Your Honour. Digging for apples indeed, said the rabbit angrily. Here, come and help me get out of this. Sounds of more broken glass. Now tell me, Pat, what's in that window? Sure, it's an arm, Your Honour, he pronounced it. An arm, you goose. Whoever saw one that size? Why, it fills the whole window. Sure it does, Your Honour, but it's an arm for all that. Well, it's got no business here, at any rate. Go and take it away. There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then, such as, sure, I don't like it, Your Honour, at all, at all. Do as I tell you, you coward. And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. This time there were 2 little shrieks, and more sounds of broken glass. What a number of cucumber frames there must be, thought Alice. I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay in here any longer. She waited for some time without hearing anything. At last came a rumbling of little cartwheels, and the sound of a good many voices all talking together. Where's the other ladder? Why I had to bring but one. Bill's got the other. Bill, fetch it, lad. Here, put 'em up at this corner. No, tie 'em together first. They won't reach half high enough yet. Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Here, Bill, catch hold of this rope. Will the roof bear? Mind that loose slate. Oh, it's coming down. Heads below. Now, who did that? It was Bill, I fancy. Who's to go down the chimney? Nay, I shan't. You do it. That I won't then. Bill's to go down. Here, Bill, the master says you have to go down the chimney. Okay, so here we can hear all of the different animals, and we're not sure what animals they are yet, but they are having a little bit of a discussion about who is going to go and get Alice out of the house. Oh, so Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he? Said Alice to herself. Why, they seem to put everything upon Bill. It wouldn't be in Bill's place for a good deal. The fireplace is narrow, to be sure, but I think I can kick a little. She drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could, and waited till she heard a little animal, she couldn't guess what sort it was, scratching and scrambling about the chimney, close above herself. Then, saying to herself, "This is Bill," she gave one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of, "There goes Bill!" Then the rabbit's voice alone, "Catch him! You, by the hedge!" Then silence, and then another confusion of voices. "Hold up his head! Brandy now, don't choke him! How was it, old fellow? What happened to you? Tell us all about it." Okay, so we can see in our picture in our book and also on our screen that Bill was actually a little lizard, which I didn't really expect him to be. Okay, but there he is, and he was sent down the chimney to try and get Alice out, but Alice thought she's not having any of that. As soon as she heard Bill coming down the chimney, she kicked her foot and he's gone flying into the air. At last came a little feeble, squeaking voice. "That's Bill," thought Alice. "Well, I hardly know. No more, thank you. I'm better now, but I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes at me like Jack in a box, and up I goes like a skyrocket." "So you did, old fellow," said the others. "We must burn the house down," said the rabbit's voice, and Alice called out as loud as she could, "If you do, I'll set Dina at you." There was a dead silence instantly, and Alice thought to herself, "I wonder what they will do next. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off." For a minute or two, she began moving about again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrowful will do, to begin with." "A barrowful of what?" thought Alice. Okay, so when he says barrowful, he's talking about a wheelbarrow. So a wheelbarrow full of something. But she had not long to doubt. For the next moment, a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. "I'll put a stop to this," she said to herself, and shouted out, "You'd better not do that again," which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head. "If I eat one of these cakes," she thought, "I'm sure to make some change in my size, and as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose." Okay, so they've sent in a barrow full of little pebbles, and these pebbles have turned to cakes. Again, supporting this idea that Alice in Wonderland is a very wacky kind of magical world. Okay, in our world, we don't have pebbles which turn to cakes, which is a little bit sad. Okay, but in Alice's in the Wonderland, they do. Okay, so I wonder what's going to happen if she eats the cake. So she swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard Bill was in the middle, being held up by two guinea pigs, who were giving it something out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could, and soon found herself safe in a thick wood. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself, as she wandered about in the wood, "is to grow to my right size again. The second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. I think that will be the best plan." It sounded an excellent plan, no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea about how to set about it, and while she was peering about anxiously among the trees, a little sharp bark just over her head made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous puppy was looking down at her with large round eyes, and feebly stretching out one paw, trying to touch her. "Poor little thing," said Alice in a coaxing tone, and she tried hard to whistle to it, but she was terribly frightened. All the time she thought that it might be hungry, in which case it'd be very likely to eat her up in spite of her coaxing. So here we can see them. We can see Alice has met this little puppy. Okay, but because Alice is still not her normal size, it's giant compared to her. Okay, so our sizes are still a little bit off, and Alice is trying to get back to be her regular size. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a little bit of stick and held it out to the puppy. Whereupon the puppy jumped in the air off all of its feet at once, with a yelp of delight, and rushed at the stick, and made believe to worry it. Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over. And the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick, and tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get hold of it. Then Alice, thinking it was very like having a game of play with a cart horse, and expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran around the thistle again. Then the puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a very little way forwards each time and a long way back, and barking hoarsely all the time, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting, with its tongue hanging out of its mouth, and its great eyes half shut. Okay, so here actually Alice is having a pretty normal experience because she's playing with the puppy, so the puppy wants to play with her stick. The only thing that's a bit strange is the puppy is now the size of a cart horse, so she's feeling a little bit worried that she might get trampled by it. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity for making her escape, so she set off at once and ran till she was quite tired and out of breath, until the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. And yet what a dear little puppy it was, said Alice, as she leant against a buttercup to rest herself, and fanned herself with one of the leaves. I should have liked teaching it tricks very much. If only I'd been the right size to do it. Oh dear, I'd nearly forgotten that I've got to grow up again. Let me see. How is it to be managed? I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other, but my question is, what? The great question certainly was what. Alice looked all around her at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she could not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself, and when she looked under it and on both sides of it and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on top of it. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on the top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah and taking not the smallest notice of her or of anything else. Okay, so we're going to meet a new character then, I think, in our next chapter, who is a blue caterpillar. And he doesn't sound like any old caterpillar because he's folding his arms, and I don't know many caterpillars that have arms. Okay, and he's smoking as well, isn't he? Okay, so that might be who we meet when we go on to chapter 5 next week. Okay, so we're going to meet a new character. But before then, we're going to have a little go thinking about a little bit about what we've just read. So the chapter was called The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. I'm wondering if you can use your inference magnifier now then to have a little think about why the chapter was called this. What happened in the chapter that made Lewis Carroll name the chapter this? Have a little think at home, see if you can work it out. The rabbit sends in a little bill. What do we think? Okay, so our chapter then was all about, wasn't it, Alice being stuck in the house, and she'd grown so big that she couldn't get out. And who did the house belong to? Can you remember? What did that plaque say? It said W Rabbit, so White Rabbit. And the rabbit was a little bit bossy now, wasn't he? And he was a little bit angry. And he said someone needs to go into the house and they need to get this girl out. So he sent in a character called Bill. Okay, so why is the chapter titled The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill? Well, it's because the white rabbit sent Bill down the chimney to try and get Alice out of the house. Okay, so well done if you figured that out. What I'd like you to do today then for your independent task is I'd like you to use your summariser magnifier, okay, and I'd like you to create a visual representation to summarise this chapter. Okay, so a lot has kind of happened in this chapter, but the main kind of thing that happened was that Alice was stuck in this house, her hands were out of the window, her foot was out of the chimney, okay, and all of the animals were at the bottom trying to figure out a way to get Alice out. I'd like you to come up with a way of visually representing this. This means you need to create some kind of picture or image to show what is happening in our picture. So you've got a few options. We've left this kind of open-ended because it's up to you how you want to do this. So you can either quite simply draw a picture that you might maybe want to label to explain what's going on. You might want to create a bit of a comic strip to show what's happening in the scene. You can use purple mash if you want to create a digital picture, Or a nice idea that Miss Dyson came up with actually was you could create a collage. Okay, so if you've got some magazines and newspapers lying around at home, and if you want to find, say, a house, then maybe you can find a big hand and a big foot sticking out of it and some animals to be at the bottom, that would also be a really, really cool way of doing this. Okay, so like I said, we're leaving this pretty open-ended for you to get a bit creative. Okay, but can you create a visual representation of this chapter? Okay, not of the whole book so far, just of this chapter where Alice is stuck in the house and Bill gets sent in to go and get her out. Okay, so that is your task for today. We can't wait to see what you come up with, and please send us your creations on Dojo so that we can see how much of a good job you have done at summarising our chapter and how creative you have been. Now, this is going to be my final remote learning video, okay, because we are back in school on Monday, which we are super duper excited about. We're super duper excited about getting to see you in person and not having to deliver through a screen. Okay, so we hope that you are feeling excited too. We really, really can't wait to see you all. Okay, it's been a little bit of a while now and we can't wait to have you all back together. Okay, so we will see you all in real life on Monday. Goodbye.